Good morning, folks.
Good morning, Sam, and whatever part of the day it is for you, see you there.
Greetings. Did you want to pause the recording, Sam?
Welcome, folks, to the February 7th, 2024 Aries Working Group call. Cyberlogic call to the antitrust policy and code of conduct are in effect. Information is available on the wiki agenda that we have, link in the chat, and also can be found in the Hyperledger wiki. You're welcome to make any changes that are useful in the wiki. The live editing is not actually on, and so your edits will be saved, but not live. They'll be merged. As people save, it gets merged in there. So it is still useful to add stuff, even though it doesn't show up on the screen live during our meeting here. But it will be there for anyone reviewing the notes or looking for a link or the other info that's contained. So please do continue to do that. Are there any new folks that want to introduce themselves? Glad you're all here. Any announcements we should have on the list but don't?
Hey, Sam. The presentation in the workshop tomorrow from DSR is on, so we should mention that. I could update. I'll add the link in. So DSR is doing one on lots of things, identity, and looking forward to that presentation.
Yeah, if you have a link there, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, it's around, so I will get that in a moment, and I'll put it in chat as well.
And that's tomorrow?
Yeah, recommend. It's at 1 hour from now tomorrow, and definitely recommend people joining in and seeing what's happening.
Cool. Sounds good.
I guess I could put in the announcements, you've got it in the agenda, but it's going to be next Tuesday that we have the next Thursday that we're going to have the TOC discussion of the various Hyperledger identity projects. So the PRs are in for Aries and OnCreds and Indy for the annual review. And so the discussion about them will be next week at next week's TOC call. And I put the links down below. I can put it up here as well.
I'll just links below.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. That was on the agenda to ask about. So
yeah.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Awesome. Lots of presents will be useful here, as this is not the quarterly review, but an annual review. And so for questions or discussion, everyone is welcome to attend that, and we'll have the links down below. So there's the event information about that. Excellent. Any release status or work updates the folks want to share?
There have been a number of tweaks made in the OnCreds Rust for the W3 as the W3C and OnCreds in W3C VCDM format has evolved, so that's good. we got a demo of Credo using an OnCreds in W3C format. Again, I'll put a link to that. We've got a YouTube video of that. Looks really good. This is work that Animo has done from a BC Gov code with us, and looks great. They've got the the format as needed. It aligns really well with the VCDI, the data integrity proofs, and works very nicely, including doing diff presentation exchange with a VP from using an OnCreds. So good stuff.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah, really good.
Very cool. Any other updates folks want to share?
Akapai has a release 1.0.0 checklist PR that I've linked in into the notes. So we're having conversations around getting that done. It's long overdue. And so we talked on the Akapug call yesterday about what's urgent that we get into a 1.0 and so on. So that's happening. 0.12, there'll be a very small increment between 0.12 and 1.0, just the probably the normal churn. We've got a couple of things we want to see done. I'm reorganizing some of the documentation and doing a pass through that. Overall looking good.
Awesome.
If anyone has any opinions on what ought to be there. The other thing to mention is Credo 050, tons of stuff happening there and going in. I've been watching the PR activity and just a lot of things going on with Credo as far as getting it wrapped up and finished. Super good work there. If you scroll up a little, Sam, or down a little.
Sec.
Oh,
I'm.
Oh, you got that in. Good.
I'm putting the link in here. Thank you, Alexander, in the chat for the link. Okay, yeah. Sorry. What am I doing?
Excellent.
Scrolling.
Scroll to the Credo section of the frameworks. There you go. 050 is in the works. Very close to being released. Dropping the Indy SDK, the revocation work, Node 16. The W3C work that I mentioned with the demo that Martin gave the other day is in there. Lots of great work on did peer 2 and did peer 4 with did rotate. All of that has been merged. So lots of really good stuff going in, and it's very, very close to being available. They're hoping to do it this week. Ariel, I don't know if you have any other updates, but super good work going on there.
Thank you. And yeah, we are just about to do the official release, hopefully by the end of this week. So yeah, we have everything in place, I think.
Awesome. That will tie in a little bit later in the conversation, touching in on the unqualified did update, which will did rotate and did peer 4 are huge for that. So awesome. Very cool. Okay. Other project updates folks want to share? All right. Here's what I threw together for the agenda. It's a little bit of a grab bag today as we sort of catch up on a variety of things that we've discussed in the past and bring the conversation a little bit current. We'll see which we make progress on and which we want to schedule out. And so as a quick review, I was going to give Helen and Alex a shout out to talk about the testimonials and examples used for Aries. We already did touch on the annual report, and so that information there with the event information after next week's Aries call, not after there, but we'll remind you again in next week's Aries call, and it'll be the day after. I wanted to touch in on unqualified DIDs, and then also OpenID for VC status and EIDAS2 compatibility, including targeted profiles here, since that's a thing, and then ideas or goals that we might have for touching up the RFC repo rendering. Touching up maybe a little light for some of the ideas, but things that we want to change about RFC rendering and organization to make that better. and then open discussion. So that's what I've kind of thrown together. Super welcome for any changes or things that we want to discuss that are not on the list or reorganizing priority here before we get going. All right, Helen, Alex?
Yeah,
Wanna-
sure. Yeah, this is just a reminder that we are working on a campaign to help grow the community, bring more people in, get people excited about Aries so that they see the awesome work that we're all doing, and really see that, you know, solutions and you know, products and applications and things that are built on Aries are pretty awesome. And so what we are doing in that vein is trying to collect, we're calling them testimonials, but it's really just statements of support, statements of interest, statements that share the excitement and success and interest you have in the project, why you are here, why you are pursuing this technology, why you're contributing to the community, why you are picking it up and your company's using it maybe. These could be, you know, personal statements just from you as an individual. They can be anonymous. We don't even have to put your name on them. Or, you know, they can be, you know, put your name and title and company by the name. Anyways, we would love to hear from you. We would love to include your voice in this campaign, the voice of the community. And so please click on the link and give us a couple sentences describing your experience with Aries and why you're here. We would love to have those. Probably it's, you know, February 7th now. I would love to hear. Would love to kind of kick off this campaign publicly. You know, probably 1st of March, or I guess Monday the 4th of March. So if you could do that as soon as possible, that'd be great. Again, it doesn't have to be, you know, loud and you know, put your name all over it. If you want to do it anonymously, that's fine. So please click on the link and check it out, and shoot me or Alex Metcalf questions if you have them.
Indeed, a ton of the usage of Aries is unsung in the sense that there are projects that people are working on and using, which is great, and we're so happy that that's happening, right? But on the other hand, it's under recognized for its use and contribution into what's actually going on. And so people, when they're looking for you know, what's going on and what's happening, it is often under the radar or far more than it should be. And so even if you don't feel like what you're doing is particularly super fancy or special or anything, but you're using it for good things, those are exactly the types of things that we need to be able to sing about. And so whatever level of publicity you are familiar with or you're comfortable with is fine. If you want to attribute it personally to you as a developer or to you as a company, all of that's fine. But any of those uses will help will help other folks know kind of what is you're capable of doing with this and how it actually works. And so I think if you I would encourage all of you to try and add you know, a statement of support or recognition of the value that the Aries project provides to you, and that would be wonderful. Don't worry about it being the same as someone else's or uninteresting. If you're willing to say anything at all, then that would be a huge help. And I imagine that all of us here can say something about what is done, since we're all here and actually care to show up to a meeting. So I could not encourage this more, because of the value that it will provide and the recognition of how this you know, Aries is being used to both prototype things and run things in production and further the work that we're all engaged in. So please grab that. Link is in the agenda to fill out a form there. If you've got any questions, you can reach out to Helen or Alex, or I'm happy to guide you if that's helpful. So please engage here, even if you don't feel like what you're doing is particularly interesting. That will it's probably more interesting than you think. Also, if you're interested in actually receiving publicity, we can help with that too, but that's certainly not a requirement for contributing. Thank you, Helen and Alex, also for your work in the background there. Anything else, or Stephen, anything that we want to add to the annual report update? We've already covered that pretty well.
No, I think that's covered. I don't think there's anything to add to that.
Okay. Next up on the agenda, we have an RFC status change. I can blame, and now that he showed up just in time for me to blame him for his work. This was done by Daniel Bloom during our last meeting, where he threw together all of the RFC status changes with the working group meeting that we discussed last week. And so these are very straightforward, that you'll notice has been put in here to manage all of the changes that we talked about. I've checked this against my notes and is correct, including a note, for example, about the traction of 2.1 and 2.2, and so that is also present there. So this is the last call. If anyone is opposed to all of these status changes being merged that we discussed last week. Awesome. I've hit approve on this, Stephen. Would you mind hitting the merge button on it while we go forward?
I will do that.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so onto our grab bag of topics. I wanted to check in on the status of unqualified DIDs. I don't have the link here, but I will find it real quick. Here it is. So here's the steps that we actually have, right? So we're past pre-work, where we actually have the details and all of that. And then next up, we're in step 1, which means that we gain support for DID rotation and DID Peer 4. And there's 2 pieces of this. One is actually getting all the implementations ready, and the second part is actually deploying. We've blown past the code update. But what the real thing that we're targeting is the ability to get it deployed, and then we can revise if necessary the goal for getting all of these agents actually deployed. The reason that step 1 is important is that it does the prep work for step 2, which is all uses of unqualified DIDs in place, then rotate in the next phase to a fully qualified DID using DID rotate and then DID Peer 4 or any other DID that is useful to rotate to that is fully qualified. And then once we are finished with that, and again we'll have to revise this data as necessary for a community target, then we will have officially deprecated the use and discontinued the use of unqualified DIDs in practice inside of all of our communities, but with an upgrade path for those that needed one, in order to revise what they're doing and maintain existing connections. So with that, what we're really looking at for is that all of our major code bases have support for DID rotation and DID Peer 4. So with that goal in mind, where are we? What does not yet have? Stephen just highlighted that Credo has support for DID rotate and DID Peer 4 and DID Peer 2, but and then Akapai, I believe, also has both of these in place. Is that correct?
No. DID rotate is not in Akbai yet.
Okay, so we have DID Peer 4.
DID Peer, so receipt of DID Peer 1, 2, and 4, and emission of DID Peer 2 and 4 is implemented.
Okay.
So DID Peer 1, 2, and 4 is receipt. DID Peer 2 and 4 emit.
Okay. So that's okay though, because it receives both on DID Peer 4, so that actually qualifies. Not yet. Remaining work is DID rotate.
Yeah. And there's a PR there that's partially done. It's just we haven't had enough resources to get it done on our side, on the BC Gov side, and focus on other work.
Okay. So That's in progress, which is excellent. Other code bases that we want to discuss the status of. We have Credo as a basis of bifold, but how is bifold doing for the use of that support within?
I
within
believe
bifold?
it would be dependent on 0.5 being released and then brought into bifold. And the Credo, yes, should be 0.5 release. Ariel, do I have that right?
Yeah. At this moment, we only have an alpha, which can be used, of course, but yeah, I think we should, for bifold integration, we should wait until it is officially released.
And the target for that is later this week.
Yes, I hope so.
Which is awesome. Well, but the point is that progress is rapidly happening, which is great. Okay, so we need some did rotate inside of Akapai, and we need the Credo release so that bifold can update and then use that information as well. And some of that will be handled automatically by Credo, but some touches may be necessary to make sure that that works through bifold. So we're close there. Other code bases that we want to discuss as part of this update. All right. So this is good. Let's keep up the work and as we're able to make that progress. Stephen, you mentioned that you have not yet been able to have the energy to get the did rotate PR fully finished. Is that something that's on the schedule? Is that an area where work could be helpful, or where assistance could be helpful? What's the status there?
Assistance could be helpful. I now have another thought of how I can get it done, so I'll think about that today. See if I can get that done, because it is a key 1.0 feature. And so I'm gonna try, but you know, if anyone's offering, it's as I say, it's Daniel Bloom got it mostly done, I think, or partially done, and so it's not starting from scratch, and so it's a great one if someone wants to jump in and help out.
Awesome. Cool. This was the update conversation I was hoping to have. So this is great. We've got Credo and bifold progress coming up soon, and then the work on did rotate there. So that's excellent. Any other comments on unqualified dids? What I figure, by the way, is when we get to the point of having releases of the software that has the support in it, then we can rediscuss the deployment date. Obviously, that will need to slip a little bit, but it's a little hard to estimate without having the code bases actually ready to ship that.
Yeah.
So we should have the conversation at that point. Excellent. Okay. Next up was OpenID for VC status, and I'm kind of curious where we are on various projects for support. I left it VC because there's VCI and VP are two separate things, and I'm kind of curious about both of them in this conversation. This has come up a number of times in the chat recently as well, and in Discord, in relevant channels about what support is or what's intended and everything else. And so I thought this would be good to kind of review where we are from this perspective so that we have sort of a touch point and something that we can point folks to understand the status of where we are. So with that, I know that Akapai has some support. Any details on where that is?
Through the plugin available in the Aries Akapai plugin repo for OpenID for VC, that currently supports issuance only, and also currently limited to JWT VC. That was kind of like our minimum viable get something implemented approach. So there's additional work to be done in order to support linked data proof VCs and SDJOT VC, though most of what's required should already be available within Akapai to accomplish that. So it's just time within the plugin that's needed. And then, of course, the VP side of the protocol also needs implementation. So that's where we're at with the plugin right now.
Awesome. I know that Credo has stuff here as well. I've been seeing Timo say things on Twitter, but I don't have a good synopsis of where that actually sits. Does anyone have some updated info on where this sits within Credo? Ooh.
Yeah, I'm not the most expert on this topic, but what I shared is a link to the features, so that we can see more or less what we are supporting now. This is well, the discussion notice is about work in progress, but what is already support is that issuance with the draft 11 with the pre-authorization code flow, also the presentation using the draft 8 and the COP v2. So
I love that you
basically,
link to the drafts, by the way, in here. That's insanely useful. Or you, I'm blaming you for this, for the work of the entire
no, I think
Credo community.
it,
But yes, having the links here is really great.
yeah, because it's quite confusing. So yeah.
Yes, so linking to a draft is necessary because that's where things are. So so that's good. So and here's the work for drafts as well, the ongoing work for. So
Yeah.
On the subject of drafts, I should also comment that the plugin for ACPI is also targeting draft 11 for the OpenID for VCI side of things. So relevant detail, I guess.
I'm gonna drop this link in here. That's insanely useful. Yes. Excellent. No, that's a perfect link, Ariel. I appreciate that. Good. And so we have support at least partially, and then Credo has a bunch, which means that should roll over to Bifold as well. Bifold will be able to take advantage of that as well, likely with some additional work, of course, because of the UI pieces and making sure that works. But the foundations are there, which is really cool. That's awesome. Any comments or updates about OpenID for VC protocol support within projects that we want to highlight or talk about? All right. So EIDAS 2.0 is the European effort going on. And one of the interesting things there is that the specifications themselves allow for lots of wiggle. And so there have emerged interoperability profiles that exist there. And so one of the, this is the Dutch, I forget what the other first I is for, interoperability profile, or no, it's not Dutch, it's decentralized identity interop profile is one of these. And I know that there are others. I think there's a high assurance profile. I may be wrong on that. HAI, there you go, interop profile. It's like a other spelling of the indie hypes. But yeah, so here's two profiles that I am aware of. At least one of these, and I think it's the high assurance, doesn't actually use DIDs as part of it, which makes me raise my eyebrow to questionable heights. But there's two of these profiles, so I'm curious for folks that are working on these. Oh, here's a link, Jorge. Fantastic. This is the high assurance one. And then I'm gonna hit save on this and then edit again so that people can like bring it up and actually look at links. Which is awesome. And so So this, of course, specifies details about the protocols in use and also the credentials in use and other details that allow, for example, which identifiers to be used in place. And I think this is the one that may use all of these protocols and the credentials themselves, but without using DIDs. They use, I believe, keys as identifiers as part of this process, which is quite interesting. And so there's that one. And I'm curious about who is interested in targeting what and has ongoing effort to make that so.
So the interesting thing about the high assurance interop profile is that's currently the only location that I'm aware of that specifies how SDJOT VC would be communicated over your OpenID for VCI. So I think there's more than one group that I'm aware of that has said that they're likely going to target like the high assurance interop profile for the SDJOT VC support. But the impression I got that it's also likely that there might be minor tweaks made in order to support using a DID as the identifier for the holder and the issuer and stuff to get to that point. And that's based off of some casual comments on GitHub issues a while ago that I had back and forth with Timo. So that might not be completely accurate or a good representation of what Credo's intentions are, but kind of an interesting nuance, at least, is because that's the only place that specifies it. People who are interested in using SDJOT VC are kind of being forced to go and look at it, pay attention to it at least.
So they're using that slice of the interop profile. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. That's useful. Other pieces of info, understanding. I imagine that we're going to see another surge of information about this during the spring conference season here within a couple of months. That's when there was kind of a surge of discussion about this last year. And I suspect that many of the same conferences are being targeted for progress or announcements or discussion or other similar things. And so I would anticipate additional info there as that comes around. Anything else we want to discuss about EIDAS 2.0? I will say that I grumble quite loudly at folks not using DIDs. There's a variety of efforts involved, that exist within the space that have decided for interesting and in my personal opinion, not great reasons to not use DIDs, and I think that that's a mistake. I think that among other things, DIDs provide an identifier metasystem that allows us to have newer, better DID methods that we can move to while not sort of upsetting the whole apple cart of the identifier infrastructure. That can also support things like service endpoints and key rotation, which I believe are also necessary for a good and effective ecosystem. And so it's a little bit mind-blowing to me that we have something that feels intentionally not being used. And so I have spoken loudly about this before. I will continue to speak loudly about it. I think that it is a mistake to not use DIDs as identifiers. There seems to be this misunderstanding that if you use DIDs, you have to automatically support all DID methods, which is completely true and untrue and has never been true. But the perception seems to still persist. But using DIDs generally as an identifier architecture, and then restricting the DID methods that you're actually willing to use because of the requirements they have, is a great path that allows you to leverage the benefits of the system and avoid all of the problems along with it, but allowing yourself the future flexibility to move forward. So I'm a little soapboxy about this, but I think that not enough has been said about the mistake of not using DIDs with any modern and particularly decentralized identity system. So there's that. Sorry for this minor soapbox rant, but it still baffles me that people are making this mistake.
Sam, a couple of questions, one related to the DID and one related to IDAS. Is IDAS hosting these interop profiles? If yes, where will it be hosted long-term for public availability?
I don't think they are. The EIDAS specifications are loose in the sense that they are they sort of set requirements that don't nail down all the details, which leaves the nailing down of the details to these interop profiles. So OpenID is hosting this particular one and everything else, and so it's a bit nuts there. Some more organization would be helpful, but there doesn't appear to be efforts by EIDAS themselves in order to sort of pick a profile that they are going to require. They're sort of setting out the overall requirements, but as we've seen with the existence of the profile, it's possible to comply with the requirements, but still be incompatible with other folks. If you're targeting the other interop profile, for example, then the reality is that you won't be able to interoperate unless you develop support for both of them, which may end up being what happens. But no, I think it's a bit of a mess.
So related to that, is Aries planning to define, and like we have AIP1 and AIP2, which can be called an interop profile. Are we planning to define them as profiles and store it somewhere? Or at least define the governance around where it needs to be kept?
I highly expect us as a community to produce another interop profile, but I don't know that it's going to fit the same category of interop profiles for EIDAS2 specifically. I think that we could point to something else that has been defined that is targeting that more directly and include that as perhaps an optional target or as something that if we decide as a community to include. So yes on interop profiles, but I don't think it's going to be an EIDAS 2.0 directly related interop profile because of that. I would expect, for example, that another Aries interop profile would discuss things like versions and targets for OpenID for VC, like what that might be included there. But I don't expect it to be lined straight out with EIDAS the way that these interop profiles are. Is that?
Yeah, that is, I understand that. So that's why the question was, is the Aries community, because otherwise everybody's going to define interop profiles their own way. They will all follow different governance, and then it's again not going to be consistent, which means that we won't be able to achieve interoperability, which is what the goal of this thing is. So is Aries going to define? Maybe somebody adopts it, at least I am reading Daniel's comment that it's a Wild West. So is there an effort to contain that Wild West?
So a little bit of a meta question is are we capable of containing that Wild West? And I believe the answer is squarely no. I don't think that there's anything that we can do as an Aries community that can bring the EIDAS profiles in particular into any sort of regular order. The point of an interop profile is that if you have two parties that point to an interop profile, they should be able to interoperate with each other, which is how we've used it within Aries, right? And so, but there's no authority within Aries to make the European Union do saner things. And so we can advocate for what we think is right. But there's no actual control there. And Daniel referenced the classic XKCD standards issue, like we have 11 standards, let's make one standard rule them all. Now we have 12 standards. That's a little bit of that. And I suspect what's going to happen is that the folks will choose the most relevant interop profiles for them to be involved in, either based on regulation or features or other things of that nature, and then we'll have other profiles that sort of drop off in importance, and no one really cares what they say anymore. And so it's a little bit of a challenge that way. What makes this really fun as well is that we're now, if I looked on the, for example, here is the Credo thing. You know, we still don't have final versions of these protocols, and they're based on these drafts, right? So a lot of people have targeted draft 11. Draft 12 is still here, but I don't actually know that that's actually the current one of all of these. And so here we have this sort of thing where everything's kind of moving underneath what's going on, and you can't really nail something down until all the pieces underneath it have stopped moving. And so I think we're in for a little bit of a situation where knowing the version that you're targeting is really, really important when it comes to that. One of the things that was done, and this may be Stephen's insistence that I think was incredibly wise, is that the Aries interop profiles actually link to a specific commit of the RFCs that we're linking to. And the benefit there is that we provide an immovable, implementation target for people that are trying to make things work together. And I think that that's incredibly valuable. I don't know if that answered your question, because I don't know that there is really a good one. Good answer, I mean.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. I was hoping at least for Aries we can define something so that like we have multiple projects, VCX, Credo, Akapai, and Go, and all of that. Like when they interoperate, and which version of Akapai you're using versus which version of Credo you're using. If something can be defined for Aries, then at least it can be a start. I don't know what you think about that.
We definitely need to create Aries interop profile 3. Aries interop profile 2 is a little bit dated at this point, although it's still a useful target that's being advanced by projects. And so I think Aries interop profile 3 is a great discussion. We actually had the beginnings of that discussion last year, and then one of the things that we realized is that the unqualified DIDs were going to be a necessary prerequisite to making it happen, and so we focused our energy first on making that happen. And it was clear too that DIDCOM v2 adoption would be also needed as part of that process. So I anticipate here, as we make progress on the unqualified DIDs transition, that we will include DIDCOM v2 support as part of AIP3, and then we get to discuss whatever else we actually want to include there to make sure that that those things can all be, can work together. So part of that, for example, is that I expect some form of DIDPeer, very likely DIDPeer 4, to be in the AIP3, so that there's common DID methods as well as perhaps other DID methods. Maybe someone wants to argue for other DID methods that get supported Aries community-wide, and that can also be included in there to facilitate the interoperability of these separate projects. So we have done that in the past, and we need to update that to be sort of relevant with our current targets as a community.
Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Any other comments on EIDS? Okay. Next is, and we've got some, I didn't know if we'd have time for it, but we do. Stephen has raised the desire to do a cleaner job of making the AIP or the RFCs within Aries accessible, so that folks can see them, read them, with less of a having to navigate GitHub structure or anything of the nature. And we've come a long way since this was actually created with GitHub action-based rendering of sites and things of that nature. And so I wanted to open the floor up a little bit to talk about what our goals would be for Aries RFC repository rendering, so that we can kind of understand what we'd like to do, and then hopefully use that to drive some forward progress. Any thoughts on what we ought to be doing here?
I think, I mean, doing just that is easy. And I apologize for not having done it, since I know how to do it pretty easily. That's a couple of hours work at most. So it's painful, and I apologize for not having done it, but there's lots of things going on. to me, the more relevant question is how we merge DIDCOM protocols, not Aries RFCs per se, but DIDCOM protocols. For doing Aries RFCs, we would just, create a make docs configuration that includes a navigation, and boom, you've got it. It's done. So Aries one is easy. The bigger one to me is how do we, what I'd like to do is turn didcom.org, as I said, I'm saying it again, make didcom.org actually a multi-sourced site that pulls relevant protocols from different places and puts them all together into a single web page that has not got links to, oh, this version of this is over on this website, so click over there, but rather just brings it all together into one. So those are my two pitches. You've heard them before.
Yes, the difficulty of updating didcom.org is substantially higher than updating Aries RFCs.
Yep, understood.
And there's some discussion about what should happen as opposed to what, just the mechanics of making it happen. The thing that makes me nervous about this is that didcom.org is simply a registry that can be used to host protocols. I am still wondering about the implications of pulling in, for example, markdown files that exist at other places and then rendering them into a site, and the possibility of having some sort of a cross-site scripting issue, or in an injection of unintended things because it's being pulled from a separate repository that we don't really have any monitoring control over. And so I have a little bit of a worry about that.
The way it's done, or at least the way I've done it in the past, is it's actually a script that you write, a bash script or whatever, that you write to pull in the things you want to pull in. It's not you're pulling in entire sites or anything like that. You're actually constructing the site by programmatically pulling in all the pieces you need.
Right, but if we're pulling in and do those pieces get committed as source into the repository, not just the render?
Yes.
Okay. So that's interesting, and we have to run that periodically to then pull and then commit versions of stuff in other places. The thing that makes me nervous about that is that I think anyone who wants to define a protocol should stick it wherever they want to. One of the alternatives is that rather than we allow for linking in the index of known protocols on didcom.org, but then when you click the link, you don't go to a rendered page on didcom.org. You go directly to where that other location is.
Can I show you ever so briefly a picture? What I've done at Akapai and it's probably overly complicated, but it's actually really easy to manage. I got into XSD wandering.
I think we can blame Daniel for that.
Yes.
So you haven't found the one where they use Google Maps and just let you drag around and everything? That one will keep you busy for a while.
This is the script, and the script that I've got. So this takes Akapai and allows me on a per release basis to update all of the docs into a new website. So this would be the equivalent of I grab things from Aries RFCs and I grab things from DIDCOM RFCs and merge them together. And so what I do is have a set navigation, which rarely changes, but every once in a while changes. I have to add a new one in. And then what I do is copy the repo as a temp. So I clone the repo in as a temp, and then I either copy files or I do updates. So what you see here is a pile of essentially copy commands. Some are plain copies because I don't have to do anything. Others, I have to do things to fix various links. And I actually will be able to eliminate a lot of these over time. But it allows me to control exactly what comes in. And so it's really this script that is just a repetitive script. It copies files from places into the repository that I want to publish. And so when we do a release of Akapai, I simply update this script as necessary for whatever documentation files have changed, and then run it, and I get akapai.org with all of the documents from Akapai available.
Still freaks me
So-
out because then you're pulling in
Okay.
files that are controlled in other repositories that then you are copying in order to render, which means that if the source file changed on one of those other repositories, you would of course want the updates there. But if one of those updates contains stuff that exploits something within the site rendering that is unintended, now we have a problem where the automated part of the build is actually causing issues. And in your example here, you're pulling from repositories that you've decided to trust into other ones, and that may be too far of a leap for the DIDCOM work to do. Part of the issue here,
I mean, there's
about
two
what's on
levels of governance there.
didcom.org.
One is what you allow, what contributors are allowed to make, and then so where you go to get RFCs to publish, and then the second is within those, which ones you're pulling in. So I think there's plenty of governance available there.
Yes, part of the meta discussion that we're talking around at the moment is that there historically all of the DIDCOM conversations happened here in Aries, because that's where
Yeah.
DIDCOM v1 was created. DIDCOM v2 was created in a group over at the diff, and now there's a users group over at the diff for DIDCOM v2 specifically.
Yeah.
And so part of the issue is about where conversations ought to happen. And there's a handful of principles that we have run by in the past, which means anyone can create a DIDCOM protocol without permission. Like you can just do that, and it can be in this group, it could be in any group, it could be over there. It doesn't really matter. DIDCOM.org is actually two things. It is one, a place to find protocols, and those protocols could be hosted other places, but there's a convenient place to search for them, and a place to actually host protocols itself. For folks that don't want to create a separate place, but they do want to have it hosted somewhere, then that's a fine place to have it hosted. And so one of the things that we haven't really talked about as a community is how we actually is where, and I mean community in the very large sense, is where we actually have these kind of conversations, which topics should probably be covered where, etc. And I don't know that I have a particular answer to that, nor do I think that we have the current time there. But I will note that there is some crossover between this crowd and that crowd, but not nearly as complete as it could be. And part of the issue is just meeting fatigue. We all have a lot of meetings to go to, and whether that it should be its own meeting or not. And other related issues to that, right? Just about areas of interest and being involved, et cetera. And so I don't have answers to those, but what I do think we could do is we could move on the Aries RFC repo rendering, which then simplifies our piece of that conversation from the Aries community, so that then we can talk more directly about the remaining pieces and how the Aries community would like to be integrated into didcom.org, for example, and the mechanisms for doing that.
So I disagree with your statement that we have to trust, or like we can't do this in some sort of decentralized way. What we've got is didcom.org is the place you publish things. Anyone is free, as you said, to go about and create a DIDCOM protocol. They would generally do that in the community, since if you're just doing it in your backyard, you're not going to get very far with it. So you're going to do it in the community, and then that community is going to pitch that it be included in the didcom.org repository. They're going to do that by some technique, such as Aries did with AIPs. So I would totally consider only putting into the didcom.org repository AIPs of Aries RFCs as desirable to be published in there, that it achieved a certain level within the Aries community, and therefore is valid to be included in that. So I think
I don't
there's
disagree with that,
lots
but I
of
suspect we're
ability to do
talking about different.
governance.
I suspect that we're talking about different levels of integration. I have zero problem with listing something and not rendering it, which is a kind of a poor version of what's done. We're doing a poor version of that now. No problem there at all. But I think that automatically pulling in content that is managed by a completely separate repository and then building it, including it, is problematic for two reasons. If it's done automatically, now you don't actually have direct control over what lands. And number two, if you do it manually, then you have a version issue where you're going to have out of date copies of that there that required some build step to make it happen. And
Okay,
so
I think we're talking past each other, and I apologize. We're out of time, so we can't continue. But I think that both those concerns can be addressed.
I know that there's a good solution that we can find that works. And so I definitely need there, and we also need the ability to more easily update and modify what's actually on didcom.org. The choice made during the initial construction of it, which I'm grateful that it exists, but some of the choices made during the initial construction make updating a little hard. And so one of the things that's under discussion is what we might do on that side to make that easier, so that the site can actually be adjusted in an easier way. So cool. We are out of time though. This has been for a grab bag of conversations. I feel like we've had really good conversation, and I appreciate that. One of the things that is on my brain is when we actually resume and revisit the AIP Next conversations to figure out what ought to actually be in a profile in that manner. We're getting real close, I feel like, on the unqualified DIDs, which means we may be able to actually begin that conversation again in earnest, which I think would be fantastic. So very cool. Thank you all for coming. I hope your week is a great one, and keep up the good work. And we will see you in all of our other online venues and in other meetings. So have a great one. And thanks for coming.
Thanks. See ya.
Yeah.